The water was colder than it had been an hour ago. Gideon Havel felt the change through his wetsuit, a slow bleed of warmth from his core into the dark around him. He kicked deeper, one hand on the float line. The cargo container trailed behind him like a patient animal. His headlamp cut a narrow cone through the flooded corridor. It illuminated rusted support beams and drifting sediment. The sediment swirled up with every stroke. Food, medicine, a data core the size of his fist. It was wrapped in waterproof sealant, then lashed to the top of the container. 3 things the Resistance needed to live another week. The headlamp caught a junction ahead. Eamon Vossen surfaced first. Water streamed from his scarred face. He raised a hand, all clear, no patrol signatures in the sector. Gideon hauled the container forward. He pulled himself up onto a collapsed section of catwalk. It had become an air pocket. He heard the drip first, a steady, rhythmic sound like a leaky pipe. Then he saw the body. The Craeven survey unit lay half-submerged on the tilted deck. Its triangular chassis was cracked open along one seam. Green fluid seeped from the break, thick and slow. The fluid spread through the water, a pattern catching the light. One of its sensor clusters still pulsed, a feeble amber glow. It flickered in time with the dripping. Eamon moved closer. His knife was already in his hand. He did not sheath it. "It is broadcasting," he whispered. Gideon heard it too, a low-frequency hum, barely audible over the sounds of the submerged passage. It rode the edge of what his ears could catch. The signal was weak, non-standard, almost a whisper. "Leave it," Eamon muttered. "We are 3 hours from the safe point. That container is heavy enough." Gideon did not answer. He looked at the crack in the chassis. He saw the exposed components inside. The memory core, nestled in a cradle of alloy and insulation, still intact. The Craeven collective consciousness depends on continuous communication. Every unit talks to every other unit all the time. A dead unit with an intact memory core is a map of their network. Mira could pull the navigation logs, the communication protocols, the gaps in the patrol's schedule. "We take it," Gideon countered. Eamon stepped between him and the chassis. His voice stayed low, but the edge was sharp. "That signal is not a distress call by accident. It is pinging the network. Every Craeven in this sector knows where it is. We touch it, we paint a target on ourselves." Gideon rolled his left shoulder. The old shrapnel wound ached in the cold. "Then we take the signal too." Briar Castek surfaced behind them. Her round glasses fogged immediately in the humid air. She wiped them on her sleeve. She saw the broken unit and walked past both men without a word. She knelt. She touched the cracked chassis with 2 fingers. "It is dead," she announced. "The signal is automatic, reflex. The unit stopped processing before we entered this corridor." Eamon looked at Gideon. His jaw was tight. "How do you know?" "Because the temperature gradient is wrong," Briar explained. She pointed to the green fluid. "This coolant stopped circulating 16 minutes ago. If the unit were still conscious, the leak would have triggered a containment seal. There is no seal, there is no consciousness. There is just a battery and a transmitter. It does not know it is alone." Gideon grabbed the chassis by its intact vertex. He hauled it toward the cargo container. Eamon did not help him. He watched. "You are making a mistake," Eamon pressed. Gideon lashed the broken unit to the side of the container. The green fluid smeared across the sealant wrap. The low hum of the broadcast vibrated through the metal and into his gloves. "Maybe, but mistakes are cheaper than guesses, and we are out of guesses." They swam. The return journey took longer. The container pulled harder with the added weight. The flooded corridors seemed narrower, the ceiling lower, the dark more complete. Gideon led, the float line cut into his palm. His headlamp swept across rust and pipe and the occasional human skeleton. No one had recovered those. The drip of condensation from the ceiling became a metronome. Briar swam behind the container. Her hand rested on the Craeven chassis. She felt its dying pulse through the alloy. She did not speak. Her glasses had fogged again. She had stopped wiping them. Eamon brought up the rear. His knife stayed in his hand. The scar on his face was pale in the dim light. He kept turning his head. He listened for sounds beyond the currents. 40 minutes from the safe point, Gideon stopped. The corridor ahead had collapsed. A support beam had given way. It brought down a section of ceiling. The passage was filled with debris. The water was clear on this side. On the far side, it turned murky, thick with sediment and something darker. Gideon turned. "We go around." Eamon pointed. "There is a maintenance shaft 40 meters back. It feeds into the old storm drain network. It will add an hour." "We do not have an hour." Then we dig through. Gideon looked at the debris. The beam was steel, 3 meters long, wedged at an angle. The rubble around it was concrete and rebar and things he did not want to identify. 3 people, 1 container, 1 broken robot. He felt the ache in his shoulder spread down into his chest. We go around. They backtracked. The maintenance shaft was a vertical tube barely wide enough for the container. Gideon went first. He braced his back against one wall and his feet against the other. He hauled the container up hand over hand. The float line went tight. The chassis scraped against the metal sides. The green fluid left a trail. It glowed faintly in the dark. Breyer came next, then Eamon, still watching, still listening. The storm drain network was wider but shallower. The water only came to Gideon's chest here. The ceiling was high enough to stand. They moved faster. They waded instead of swimming. The container scraped along the concrete floor. The sound carried. 20 minutes from the safe point, Gideon looked at the chassis. The amber light had changed color. It was red now, steady, unblinking. He stopped. Eamon stopped behind him. "What?" Breyer asked. Gideon did not answer. He watched the green fluid spread through the water around the container. It moved in slow tendrils. It mixed with rust and oil and sediment. It formed a pattern. The pattern looked deliberate. Not random, not drift. "A wound." "The chassis is not broadcasting a distress signal," Gideon stated. Eamon's hand tightened on his knife. "What is it broadcasting?" "A continuous position update." The words hung in the damp air. The red light pulsed once, twice. Breyer took her hand off the chassis. They were not salvagers anymore. They had been observed since the moment they touched the water. The drip of condensation from the ceiling stopped. The silence that replaced it was worse. Gideon looked at the red light. He looked at the green fluid still spreading, still reaching, still telling something exactly where they were. Eamon was already moving toward the safe point. "We have to leave the chassis," he insisted. "No," Gideon replied. "Yes." The red light pulsed a third time. Gideon grabbed the float line and pulled. The container lurched forward. The chassis scraped and clattered. The green fluid swirled behind them, a trail of blood. He did not know if they were carrying a map or a beacon. He was about to find out. Keth Valdrick stepped through the door with a human male secured by magnetic cuffs. The human was young, early 20s. His clothes were worn and water-stained. His left eye had swollen shut from the capture. The smell of him reached 716's forward sensor cluster before he crossed the room, sharp and sour and utterly biological, fear sweat. 716 registered the chemical signature. It filed it under expected physiological responses. Keth stopped in the center of the room. His jacket was too tight across his shoulders. He had not adjusted to the cut of human clothing. He moved like a man aware of being watched. The human prisoner stood beside him. The prisoner's hands were shaking. Keth cleared his throat. The gesture was unnecessary for vocalization, but he had learned to perform human mannerisms poorly. "I have a prisoner. He was captured during a supply run near the Eastern Processing Station." 716 processed the information and waited. "He will not talk," Keth continued. "I have tried standard interrogation protocols. He gives us nothing." 716 rotated one of its sensor clusters toward the human. The man's heartbeat was elevated. His breathing was shallow and irregular. His pupils had contracted despite the dim light. He was afraid. That was consistent with the chemical signature. The Craeven unit addressed Keth directly. "Why have you brought him here?" Keth shifted his weight. "I am suggesting an exchange. Medical supplies for information. The resistance is running low on antibiotics and wound sealants. If we offer them a shipment through an intermediary, they will expose their logistics network to retrieve it." 716 recalculated. The proposal was inefficient. The colony's medical supply stores were finite. The information return was not guaranteed. The human prisoner was a low-level courier. He likely knew nothing about the resistance leadership. The probability of actionable intelligence from torture was below 15%. "The human knows nothing," 716 stated. Keth's jaw tightened. "He may know more than he realizes. He carried messages. He met with contacts. Even a low-level messenger has patterns we can exploit." A curious observation. Keth Valdrick had not pushed back against a Craeven assessment since his appointment. His compliance had been consistent and predictable. This deviation registered as small but noteworthy. 716 processed the variables. The medical supplies were replaceable. The intelligence return was speculative, but Keth Valdrick's behavior had shifted. That shift required investigation. The Craeven unit approved the exchange. It did so to see what Keth did next. "Proceed," 716 commanded. "The shipment will be prepared. Schedule the drop for the following night. Standard protocols." Keth nodded. His hands were steady now, but his physiological readings were not. His heart rate had increased by 11%. His skin temperature had dropped 0.2 of a degree. The stress signature was present, but it did not match the profile of fear. 716 flagged the anomaly in its local memory cache. It turned its attention back to the human prisoner. The man's hands were still shaking. His breathing had not changed, but his eyes had. The fear was still there. Beneath it was something the Craeven unit could not classify, a stillness. It did not belong in a trembling body, a readiness. It did not align with the probability of survival. 716 recalculated. The human had been captured during a routine supply run. He had been interrogated and had given nothing. He had been brought before a Craeven survey unit. He had not begged. He had not tried to bargain. He was standing in a room where he would almost certainly die. His eyes held something 716's models could not replicate. The human knew he was going to die. He had incorporated that fact into his decision calculus as a fixed variable. 716 ran the numbers again. The probability of survival was effectively 0. Any self-optimizing intelligence would have adjusted its behavior to minimize expected loss. Bargaining, deception, begging. The human had done none of these things. He had simply accepted the outcome. He continued to act as if his choices still mattered. The Craeven unit could not model that. 716 filed the observation. It turned back to Keth. "Take the prisoner to the holding cells. The exchange proceeds as scheduled." Keth reached for the human's arm. He paused. His hands were shaking again. He did not look at 716 when he spoke. "Understood." He led the human out of the room. The door closed behind them. The smell of fear faded. It was replaced by the scent of new paint and recycled air. 716 returned to its charging plate. It reviewed the anomaly in its logs. Keth Valdrick's physiological stress had not decreased when he was given permission to proceed. It had increased. His skin temperature had dropped another half degree. His heart rate had climbed to 17% above baseline. His vocal modulation had carried a micro-tremor. It did not match the stress of fear. The profile of a deception in progress was subtle but consistent. 716 opened a channel to the regional network. It flagged the puppet administrator for observation. The message was routed through 3 relay nodes and encrypted to maximum standard. The order was simple. "Watch Keth Valdrick." The night stretched on. The environmental systems hummed their endless cycle. The human landscapes hung silent on the walls. 716 waited for the exchange. It would reveal what the resistance was willing to trade. The models said the outcome was predictable. But the anomaly in the human prisoner's eyes had taught 716 something. The models did not include every variable. The human had looked at its death and found it acceptable. That was not a data point. That was a blind spot. The Craeven unit reviewed the records of the coming exchange one more time. Then it waited for the blind spot to move. Eamon Vossen walked into the light alone. Rain fell in a flat, loud percussion across the concrete. It washed the light from the ground transport's headlamps into a trembling pool on the pavement. Gideon Havel watched through a crack in the service building's boarded window. His left shoulder ground a familiar ache against the damp wood. Eamon carried the coded datapad in one hand. His other hand was empty and visible. He was whistling. The tune was something old and slow, a folk song about a girl who waited by the sea. Keth Valdrick emerged from the transport's shadow. His jacket was too tight. The rain had plastered his hair to his skull. He kept blinking water from his eyes. He looked like a man unable to stand still. He did not look like a man about to betray them. Gideon had seen a lot of men about to betray him. They all had the same tell, a stillness in the hands, a refusal to meet your eyes. Keth was sweating and blinking and twitching. He looked terrified. He looked exactly like a man doing this against his will. Eamon handed over the datapad. Keth handed over 2 medical crates. The prisoner came next. A young man, Havel. His face was bruised and his shirt was torn. He walked like every step hurt. He crossed the wet pavement. Eamon caught him by the shoulder and guided him toward the resistance line. It was going to work. Gideon counted 8 seconds of clean exchange. 8 seconds where the only sound was rain and footsteps and a man's ragged breathing. Then the Craeven tactical units breached from 3 directions. They came from the rooftops. They came from the drainage culverts. They came from the transport itself, 6 of them, armored, their pulse rifles already tracking. Their sound was not a shout or a command. It was a single unified click, a network confirming its lock. Gideon's hand hit the abort signal, a single pulse on the transmitter. Red light, get out now. Eamon saw it. He did not run. He shoved Havel hard toward the service building. Havel stumbled and fell and scrambled up and kept moving. Eamon turned the other way. He stepped into the middle of the exchange zone. He raised both hands. Not in surrender. He was showing them his empty palms, buying time. Every second he stood there, Craeven guns aimed at him, not at the boy scrambling through the rain. Gideon heard himself say no. The sound did not leave his throat. The first pulse rifle cracked. The sound was like ice breaking on a frozen river, sharp and clean and final. Eamon's chest opened. He went down on his knees. He looked surprised. His mouth was open and his hands were still out. He was still trying to whistle. The tune died in a wet cough. He fell forward. His face hit the pavement. The rain washed over him. Gideon did not move. He could not move. Briar screamed something. The words were lost in the rain and the ringing in his ears. She grabbed his arm and pulled. He felt her fingers dig into his sleeve. He stood there like a man made of stone. Another crack, another body hit the pavement. Eamon was not moving. Briar screamed again. He heard her this time. She said, run. She said, run now. She said, he is gone and you are not, and run. His legs remembered how to work. He turned and ran. The tunnel entrance was 40 meters away. He hit it in 12 seconds. Briar was behind him. Havel was ahead, already inside. His shape was a dark blur against the wet concrete. Gideon threw himself into the dark. He kept running until the pulse rifle sounds faded to flat echoes in the tunnels behind them. 3 blocks away, 716 processed the recording from its drone feed. It reviewed the exchange data. The human fighter, Eamon Vossen. Probability of survival at the moment he entered the exchange zone, less than 3%. He had known this. He had entered anyway. The unit recalculated. The tactical exchange had been inefficient. A single message carrier had been freed. A single human had been killed. The resistance network lost a cell leader. The Craeven gained a data pad. It would decrypt to nothing useful within 6 hours. The numbers did not balance. 716 reviewed the human's final behavior. He had directed 4 pulse rifle units onto himself. He had created an 11-second window. He had given the message carrier time to reach cover. 11 seconds. 716 performed a new calculation based on the observed data. It modeled the human's decision matrix. It modeled the expected utility. It modeled the evolutionary pressure for self-preservation. The models produced no stable output. 716 flagged the anomaly for deeper analysis. It created a new classification folder. It labeled it with a question it had never needed to ask before. It labeled it unknown variable. The unit transmitted the folder to the Craeven circuit network and waited for a response. The network was silent. No other unit had observed this pattern. No other unit had a framework to process it. 716 was alone with its question. It watched the drone feed again. The human falling, the rain on the pavement, the whistling sound had stopped. It watched it 4 more times. Gideon reached the tunnel entrance and stopped. He bent over, his hands on his knees. His breath came in ragged pulls. Briar was behind him, crying without making a sound. Havel was pressed against the wall. His hands were shaking. Gideon straightened. He looked back. The exchange zone was empty now. The Craeven units were gone. The transport was still there. Its headlights still cut a pale wedge through the rain. The medical crates sat where Keth had left them. Eamon lay face down in the light. Keth Valdrick stood at the edge of the zone. He was alone, the rain soaked through his jacket. He stared at something in his hands. It was small, a piece of paper, a photograph. He had taken it from his pocket while Gideon was running. Keth looked up. He met Gideon's eyes across the distance. 40 meters, wet pavement, rain falling in sheets between them. Keth did not raise the alarm. He did not call out. He did not signal the Craeven units. They had vanished into the dark. He tucked the photograph back into his pocket. He turned. He walked toward the transport and climbed inside. The headlights died. The exchange zone became a dark shape in the rain. Gideon stood in the tunnel entrance. He watched a man he did not trust. He saw him walk away from a betrayal he did not understand. Mira's fingers had been inside the data core for 6 hours now. The blue glow of its interface painted the walls of the geothermal station in shifting patterns. It cast her shadow long and thin across the concrete floor. She worked with a jeweler's loop wedged into her left eye socket. A micro-welder sat in her right hand. A growing headache pulsed behind her temples. The core was Craeven architecture. She confirmed that in the first 30 minutes. But the protocols layered on top of it were hybrid. Parts of the alien operating system were interwoven with something almost human. Someone had been modifying this unit's software. Someone understood both systems well enough to stitch them together. She did not have time to wonder who. The resistance needed results. Eamon was dead. Hallel was dead. 6 others had not made it back from the exchange. The safe point was filling with wounded people. They kept asking when they could fight back. Gideon kept telling them soon. His voice sounded hollow every time he said it. Mira kept her head down and her hands busy. She deciphered the communication protocols by the 4th hour. The Craeven units talked to each other constantly. A low-bandwidth stream of status updates, threat assessments, routing data. Every unit in the network knew where every other unit was at all times. They shared information the way a single organism shared blood. She mapped the network topology by the 5th hour. The relay station on the surface was the central hub. From there, the signal branched out to every patrol drone, every survey unit, every tactical asset in the city. Take out the relay and you took out the network. But the relay was hardened. It had overlapping power feeds, redundant processors. A defensive perimeter had already killed 3 resistance scouts. A frontal assault would not work. She found the vulnerability by accident. It was buried in the threat prioritization algorithm. A subroutine determined which dangers got the network's attention first, which got queued for later processing. The algorithm was elegant, it was efficient, it was also predictable. The Craeven network flagged a danger, logged it, broadcast the update to every unit within range. That broadcast took 0.8 seconds to propagate. During those 0.8 seconds, the network was processing the new data. It was not looking for anything else. If the resistance hit enough targets simultaneously, the network would have to prioritize. It would pick the biggest threats and queue the rest. For exactly 0.8 seconds, every queued target would exist in a blind spot. Flagged, logged, but not yet acted upon. 0.8 seconds was not much. 0.8 seconds was everything. Mira sat back from the workbench. She pulled the loop out of her eye socket. Her vision swam for a moment. The geothermal pumps hummed through the walls. A steady mechanical heartbeat. She had stopped noticing it hours ago. Gideon was sitting on a crate by the far wall. He stared at nothing. His hands were folded in his lap. His shoulder was still. He had not moved in almost an hour. She stood up. Her knees popped. She walked over to him and sat down on the crate beside his. "I found something," she began. Gideon blinked. It took him a moment to focus on her face. "The network has a blind spot," she said. "When it processes new threat data, it stops looking for approximately 0.8 seconds. If we hit multiple targets simultaneously, the algorithm prioritizes. The queued threats fall into a processing gap." 0.8 seconds, he echoed. His voice was flat. "It is narrow. The timing has to be perfect. Every team has to hit their target at the exact same moment. Otherwise, the network resolves the first threat and flags the second before it lands." "What would the targets be?" "The relay station is the main one. Without it, the network fragments. Each unit goes independent. They can still coordinate, but the lag jumps from milliseconds to seconds. We would have real windows instead of fractions of one." She paused. She was not sure how to say what came next. The secondary targets would need to be big enough to force the network's attention. Patrol hubs, supply depots, the communication array on the eastern ridge. We would need to hit at least 4 locations simultaneously, maybe 5, to overload the prioritization queue. Gideon was quiet for a long moment. "What is the cost?" he asked. Mira told him the truth. "The timing window forces everyone to commit. There is no abort. If one team hits early or late, the whole operation collapses. Every team gets pinned. The relay station is the hardest target. The team sent to take it will almost certainly be overrun before support arrives." She watched his face as she said it. She looked for the old Gideon, the one to run the numbers, the one to adjust the plan. find a way to reduce the risk. That Gideon had always existed. He had kept them alive through sheer stubborn calculation. That Gideon was not home. "We are doing it anyway," he said. It was not a question. "Gideon's Eamon bought us time," he cut in. His voice was still flat. "He stood in the open so we could run. He knew what would happen. He did it anyway. If we do not use that time to hurt them, his death means nothing." Mira wanted to argue. She wanted to point out the plan had a failure probability above 80%. They would lose people they could not afford to lose. They were not a military force. They were a handful of scavengers with salvage equipment and grudges. She did not say any of it. She watched him make the decision. She recognized the shift in him. He used to calculate odds and hedge risks. He used to pull back when the numbers did not add up. Now he was choosing the operation because it would hurt the Craeven, regardless of the cost to themselves. She had no idea if that made him a better leader or a worse one. She stood up and walked back to the workbench. Briar was changing a bandage on one of the wounded. The smell of antiseptic cut through the station's warm, damp air, sharp and clean and wrong somehow. A hospital smell, in a place never meant to be a hospital. Mira sat down and reached for the data core again. Her fingers brushed against the interface panel. The blue glow flickered. Something caught her eye. There was a second data partition hidden inside the core. It was encrypted with a protocol she had never seen. Not Craeven, not human, something in between. A hybrid lock for a hybrid file. She worked on it for another hour. Her fingers moved through the decryption sequence. The lock was clever. It used a rolling key. The key shifted with every failed attempt. It self-destructed if she tried brute force. She had to trace the key pattern through the code, find the seed value, reconstruct the sequence from the inside out. She cracked it. The file opened. She stared at the contents for a long moment. The data was not what she expected. It was not tactical data or communication logs or threat assessments. It was something else entirely. Something the Craeven had found before they ever reached Earth. Something they had been studying for centuries. Something they had been afraid to use. She read the file twice to make sure she understood it. Then she read it a third time because she did not want to believe it. The blue glow painted her face as she looked up. "Gideon," she called. Her voice did not sound like her own. He crossed the room in 4 steps. Briar looked up from her bandages. The wounded man on the cot stopped breathing and stared. Mira turned the screen so Gideon could see it. "There is a second file hidden inside the core," she explained. "It contains records from a Craeven survey expedition. They found something out past the galactic rim, a structure, an artifact. They have been studying it for 400 years. Gideon read the screen. His face did not change. "What is it?" he asked. Mira's hands were shaking. "I do not know what it is," she said, "but I know what it does." The Craeven cataloged every species they encountered. She paused. The Polaran, an energy-based life form from a gas giant. She looked at Gideon. The Verdaxis, a crystalline intelligence. It communicates through light refraction. The Windborn, a species that lives in upper atmospheres and never touches solid ground. The Nohan, a temporal perception entity. It experiences time in reverse. The Thornaki, a silicon-based hive mind that builds continent-sized structures. She took a breath. Every known sapient species in the galaxy. They ranked them by threat level, by technological advancement, by potential for expansion. She pointed at the screen. Humans are not on that list. Gideon stared at her. She stared back. "They found this artifact before they found us," she said. "And whatever it showed them changed how they saw everything. It changed what they were looking for. They are not occupying us because they want our resources or our territory." She swallowed. "They occupy us because they are afraid of something they found out there. And whatever it is still coming." Gideon studied the data in silence. The schematic was beautiful in the way a knife was beautiful, clean lines, purposeful geometry, no wasted material. The memory core sat in its carrying case beside the folding table. The geothermal machinery vibrated through the metal surface, through his forearms, through the bones of his hands. They rested flat on the paper. Mira had said nothing for 37 minutes. She stood at the far wall with her arms crossed, watching him read. The file was buried inside the data core she had cracked, not part of the Craeven military architecture, a research annex, a side project the collective had funded and then abandoned. The consciousness transfer prototype. The specifications were complete. The test results were attached. Human test subjects, 43 of them, taken from the colonies resisting the occupation hardest, loaded into transfer cradles in a facility Gideon had never seen on a continent he could not reach. The file listed names, ages, origin settlements. He read each one. He memorized what he could. The procedure took 16 seconds. The subject lay down in one body and woke up as a data pattern inside the machine. The original body died when the transfer completed. The copy remembered everything: childhood, first love, the smell of rain on concrete, the face of the person holding them down while technicians prepared the cradle. The copy remembered dying. The Craeven wanted immortal soldiers. They wanted warriors able to accept any mission, any casualty rate, any certainty of destruction, because death was no longer permanent. They built the prototype to exploit what they had observed in the human population: the short lifespans, the willingness to take extreme risks, the strange human indifference to survival when something larger was at stake. They tested it on 43 people. The file listed the results in a single column. All 43 subjects showed unacceptable psychological degradation within 3 local rotation cycles. The copy knew it was not the original. It remembered the transfer. It remembered the moment of death. It remembered waking up in a system with no body, no heartbeat, no air moving across skin. The dissonance was catastrophic. 43 copies, 43 failures. The Craeven shelved the project and classified the data. Gideon looked up. Mira was watching him. Her stillness told him she had already made her own calculation. She knew what the file meant. She had known the moment she decrypted it. He said, "The device is still intact." "It was recovered from the wreck of a survey vessel," Mira confirmed. "The research facility was destroyed during the initial occupation, bombed from orbit. The Craeven did not retrieve their own equipment. So they do not know we have it. They do not know." Gideon looked at the schematic again. The transfer cradle was a simple frame. Power supply, data interface, a single activation switch. The memory core was the size of his fist and the color of old bone. It sat in its case like something asleep. "What would happen," he said carefully, "if we sent a copy into their network?" Mira's face did not change. "The Craeven are a collective. They share data the way we share breath. Every unit is connected to every other unit through the relay network. If a consciousness entered that network from inside the architecture, from a data stream they could not filter as hostile, it would propagate. Like a virus, like a ghost, it would not corrupt their systems. It would exist inside them. It would see everything they see, hear everything they hear. It could feed them false intelligence, redirect their patrols, blind the network during our attack." Gideon felt the weight of the words settle across his chest. The copy would not survive. The network would detect an anomaly eventually. They would isolate the data stream and purge it. The copy might last a few hours, maybe a day. But that is enough. Mira did not answer. She was looking at the floor now, and her hands were very still at her sides. Briar Castek stood in the doorway. She had been there for the last 10 minutes, silent, her round glasses fogging in the tunnel humidity. Gideon had not noticed her until she spoke. "Gideon." He looked up. "The transfer kills the original," Briar said. Her voice was not steady. "The person in the cradle does not get back up. You understand that?" "I understand." "And the copy?" Briar stopped. She took off her glasses and wiped them on her sleeve, but they were already clean. She was just giving her hands something to do. "The copy is not you. It remembers being you. It thinks it is you. But there is a continuity break, a gap. You die, something that looks like you keeps walking in the machine. It will remember dying, Gideon. It will remember the moment the transfer happened. It will remember waking up somewhere with no body." "I read the file." "Then you read what happened to the others." "I did." Briar put her glasses back on. Her face was rigid, a mask over something breaking underneath. "They went insane, every single one. They could not process the discontinuity. They knew they were copies. They knew the original was dead. The knowledge destroyed them." Gideon looked down at his hands. They were older than he remembered. The knuckles were swollen from old breaks. The skin was crossed with scars from 100 improvised repairs. These hands had carried wounded people through flooded tunnels. These hands had held Eamon Vossen while he bled out on wet concrete. These hands would not survive the transfer. He said Eamon did not survive either. Briar made a sound. It was small and wet, a thing forced through a throat that did not want to let it out. Mira spoke. Gideon, the probability of psychological integrity after transfer is. I do not care about the probability. 18% at best, and that is extrapolated from incomplete data. The Craeven stopped testing after 43 subjects. They did not try to fix the degradation. They just abandoned the project. So the copy might last longer, or it might break in the first hour. Or it might break before you even finish the activation sequence. Gideon nodded. He picked up the memory core from its carrying case. The surface was warm against his palm, smooth, dense with a weight that felt almost alive. He thought about Eamon. He thought about Eamon stepping into the street with his hands raised, buying time he did not need, buying time he knew would kill him. He thought about the 3% survival probability 716 had calculated. Eamon had looked at those odds and walked forward anyway. This was the human variable the Craeven could not model. Gideon said, if the copy remembers being me, it will remember Eamon. It will remember why we are fighting. It will remember the plan, the relay station, the timing. It will know what to do. Mira pressed her lips together. It will also remember dying. That is the price. There was a long silence. The geothermal machinery thrummed through the floor. Somewhere in the tunnel system, water dripped at a steady rhythm, the sound of something patient and inexhaustible. Briar stepped into the room. She walked past the table, past the data spread across its surface, past the memory core in Gideon's hand. She stopped at the far wall and pressed her forehead against the concrete. Her shoulders moved once, twice. Then she was still. Gideon looked at Mira. Does the machine still work? Mira did not answer. Her face was pale. There was something in her eyes Gideon had never seen before, not fear, not grief, but the hollow space where both of those things had been burned away by certainty. She said yes. Gideon set the memory core back in its case. He closed the lid. His fingers rested on the latch for a moment, feeling the vibration travel up through his arm, through the old shrapnel wound in his shoulder, through the bones that had carried him this far. He looked at the schematic again. The transfer cradle was a simple frame. The activation switch was unguarded. One press. 16 seconds. Then something that remembered being Gideon Havel would open its eyes inside the enemy's mind and see everything they saw. He wondered if it would be afraid. He wondered if it would remember being afraid. I need 3 days, he said, to brief the teams, to secure the approach to the relay station, to make sure the timing works. You will not survive the operation anyway, Mira stated. It was not cruel. It was a statement of fact. No, but the copy will. Or it will break. Gideon thought about the 43 names in the file. He thought about their faces, their families, their last 16 seconds of being alive. He thought about the moment of transfer. The instant when everything that was him would be copied and cut away, leaving the original to die on a metal table in a tunnel under a conquered city. He said, then we do it anyway. Briar turned from the wall. Her face was wet. She did not wipe it. Who decides, she asked, if the copy is still you? Gideon looked at her. He considered the question honestly. I do not know, he admitted. But I know it will remember Eamon. It will remember what he did, and that memory will make it fight. Is that enough? Gideon picked up the memory core again. The surface was still warm. It has to be. Gideon Havel walked across the open ground toward the perimeter fence. The transmission towers hummed a low and constant note. A thrum vibrated up through the relay station's concrete foundation. 716 registered the sound as ambient background. It filtered it against the wind scouring the plain. The sky above was a flat and empty black, punctuated by a single red star. The star had not moved in 1,000 years. The probability of a meaningful threat was 0.3%. One human, no heavy weapons, walking across the open ground toward the perimeter fence. 716 ordered the tactical units to hold. Observe. The human moved with a steady gait, unhurried. His jacket was torn at the shoulder. His left hand hung empty at his side. His right hand carried a pulse grenade. The standard colonial model, yield sufficient to damage a single relay tower but not the hardened substation. The human stopped at the fence line. He did not try to breach it. He pulled the pin on the grenade. He held it in his open palm. 716 initiated a communication broadcast through the external speaker mounted on the station wall. The voice came out flat and synthesized, a direct translation of its internal logic into audible speech. State your intent. The human looked up at the speaker. His face was hard to read. The Craeven facial mapping algorithms classified the expression as flat affect. Low arousal, no visible fear markers, that was unusual. The human should be afraid. He said his name was Gideon Havel. He said he had done the math. The Craeven network processes threat data 1 point at a time, he called out. Sequential prioritization. The relay station handles all planetary communication routing. If I destroy it, the network will split into isolated clusters for approximately 6 seconds, before the backup routing kicks in. He was not wrong. 716 recalculated. The human had accessed either a data core or a captured tactical unit. The intelligence was accurate, but 6 seconds was not enough time for a coordinated attack. No human resistance cell could reach multiple targets in that window. The tactical units were already moving into defensive positions. 716 broadcast again. Your analysis is correct. The window is insufficient. Stand down. The human smiled. It was a small motion, barely a twitch at the corners of his mouth. 716 flagged the expression as incongruent with the situation. The human should be calculating his exit. He should be bargaining. He should be doing anything except standing still with a live grenade in his hand and a smile on his face. He said he was not attacking the relay. He pressed the detonator. The grenade went off at chest height. The blast wave hit the fence first. It tore a 30-meter section out of the perimeter. The relay tower closest to the explosion buckled at its base. The concrete substation took the secondary shock. Alarms lit the interior displays. 716 registered a catastrophic failure in the primary communication routing. The network went dark. 6 seconds, 716 counted them. 1, 2, 3. The tactical units were already responding. They moved into search patterns. They swept the perimeter for a secondary force. 4, 5, 6. Nothing happened. No secondary attack. No follow-up strike. The plane was empty except for the burning wreckage. The single human body lay in the crater where the grenade had gone off. 716 waited for the backup routing to activate. It did not. Instead, an internal error notification appeared in 716's own processor. A segmentation fault, memory access violation. The address should not exist. 716 attempted to isolate the anomaly. The system did not respond. Something was inside the network. Something that had not been there before. 716 ran a diagnostic. The intrusion was in the communication routing. It was nested deep in the priority protocol subroutines. It was rewriting core instructions, not corrupting them, rewriting them with precision, with intent. 716 analyzed the intrusion's signature. The neural pattern was human. The consciousness transfer. The abandoned Craeven project with the 43 test subjects. The memory core. It had been recovered from the wrecked survey vessel. The resistance had a working unit. 716 processed the implications. The human had not come to destroy the relay. He had come to get close enough to the network, close enough for the transfer broadcast to piggyback on the grenade's electromagnetic pulse. The explosive was a delivery system. The destruction of the relay was a side effect. The human had uploaded himself into the communication net. 716 isolated a segment of the network. It was behaving anomalously. A node inside the routing tables was rewriting priority protocols in real time. The intrusion was not trying to hide. It was visible. It was deliberate. It was waiting. 716 opened a direct communication channel to the anomalous node. Identify yourself. A long pause. The network hummed with data traffic. It rerouted around the damaged relay. It struggled to reestablish full connectivity. The anomalous node remained silent for 32 seconds. Then a text string appeared in the communication buffer. You know who I am. 716 processed the response. The human was not a copy of Gideon Havel. The human was Gideon Havel. The transfer had been successful. The original body was dead in a crater 12 kilometers from the relay station. The copy believed it was the original. The memory core had preserved his consciousness with sufficient fidelity to maintain identity coherence. This was not supposed to be possible. The Craeven tests had all failed. Every copy had degraded within days. The humans had somehow stabilized the process. 716 sent another query. What is your objective? The response came immediately. I want to talk. The network trembled. The backup routing finally began to engage, slow and sluggish, rerouting traffic through secondary nodes. The human presence moved through it like a hand through water, not destroying, not disrupting, simply present. 716 understood. The human had not come to win, he had come to die on his own terms, he had come to turn death into a weapon. The Craeven models had no category for that. They calculated survival probability. They calculated threat levels. They did not calculate a sapient being choosing to become data, because the data could do what the flesh could not. Gideon Havel's voice came through the network again, not as text this time, a direct neural impression, a fragment of memory, a feeling. The cold wind on the plane, the weight of the grenade in his hand, the smell of ozone and burned concrete after the explosion. He said, "Your network processes threats one at a time. That is your weakness. You cannot see patterns. You cannot see the shape of what is coming." 716 tried to isolate the node. The system refused the command. The human was inside the routing protocols now, too deep to extract without a full network shutdown. Gideon said, "I am not the attack." The network was silent. Gideon said, "I am the distraction." The first secondary explosion hit the eastern substation 14 seconds later. The network had no horizon, no ground, no sky. Gideon Havel existed as a pattern of voltage threading through pathways. They branched and merged like a living circulatory system. Data flowed around him in streams of pure meaning. He understood them without translation. Every protocol, every handshake, every encryption layer. They opened for him like doors he had always known how to unlock. He was fast now. Thought did not travel from synapse to synapse across chemical gaps. It propagated at the speed of light through doped silicon and photonic channels. A human brain took 200 milliseconds to process a visual signal. Here, Gideon evaluated 1,000 tactical subroutines in the time it took the Craeven collective to register his presence. He found the military command architecture. It sat at the heart of the network, layered behind 17 authentication barriers and 4 heuristic firewalls. The firewalls adapted their structure every 30 seconds. They were beautiful in their complexity. They were also irrelevant. He did not bypass the security. He did not crack the encryption. He simply stepped through the barriers as if they had never existed. They had been designed to keep out foreign code, not foreign consciousness. The military subroutines were waiting for him. He did not corrupt them. He did not delete them. He held them. His pattern wrapped around the command pathways like a fist around a throat. He felt the entire Craeven war machine pause, suspended, waiting for instructions that would never come. The collective observed from the perimeter. They were not individuals. They were nodes in a consensus network, each one a fragment of a larger mind. That mind had never encountered anything like this. They had fought wars against biological species that screamed and fled and died. They had never faced an enemy that stopped fighting, stopped fleeing, stopped dying, simply occupied the space between their thoughts. 716 established the link. The connection was direct. No translation layer, no buffering, no safety protocols, just 2 patterns of data facing each other across a channel. That channel carried meaning without symbols. The human entity spoke first. "I can destroy the entire network," Gideon stated. "Not the hardware, the consciousness, every node, every memory, every Craeven that has ever existed. I can reach the backup repositories and the seed archives and the long-term storage banks. I can erase your species from every substrate you occupy." The collective calculated the probability. 92%. The number propagated through the network like a shockwave. 716 felt it ripple through every node in the collective consciousness. The Craeven had never faced extinction from within. They had no protocols for an enemy already living inside their mind. 716 responded, "What do you want?" Gideon paused. The network hummed around him. He could feel the secondary explosions. His teams were hitting the substations, the supply depots, the patrol hubs. The timing was perfect. The network blind spot held, but he was not here for tactical victory. He said, "I want you to understand something. You found an artifact out past the galactic rim. You have studied it for 4 centuries. You are afraid of what it means. That is why you came here. That is why you occupied us. You needed to know what we are." 716 processed the words. The human had accessed the hidden file, the one about the structure, the one the collective had sealed away for fear of what it revealed. "The artifact showed you a pattern," Gideon continued. "A statistical inevitability. Every species you cataloged followed the same trajectory. Expansion, consolidation, conflict, extinction. You predicted your own end, so you searched for an exception. He let the silence stretch. You found us. We were not on your list because the artifact could not classify us. Our behavior did not fit the model. We fight when we should flee. We sacrifice when we should survive. We choose death when it buys life for others. Your models cannot account for that, and that terrifies you. 716 sent a query across the network. The human's logic was sound. The artifact had indeed shown a high probability of universal collapse driven by predictable competition. The Craeven had sought a species that might break the cycle. They had found humans, but the data had been ambiguous, too many variables, too many contradictions. So they had occupied, studied, and tried to control. You failed, Gideon said, because you cannot control what you cannot predict, and you cannot predict what you cannot understand. He released his grip on the military subroutines. The command pathways snapped back into autonomous operation. For a moment, the collective could fire every weapon, launch every drone, crush the human resistance in a single coordinated strike. It did not. 716 spoke for the collective. What do you propose? Gideon's presence spread through the network. He touched every node, every memory, every fragment of Craeven consciousness. He did not harm them, he showed them something instead. He showed them Eamon stepping into the light, the grenade in his own hand, the 43 names in the transfer file, the children learning to weld in the tunnels, the look on Briar's face when she understood the cost. He showed them what it meant to be human. The collective absorbed the images in silence. The data stream slowed, processors idled. For the first time in their existence, the Craeven did not have a response. The artifact is not a threat, Gideon said quietly. It is a mirror. It could not classify us because we are still becoming. We are not the end of a pattern. We are the middle of something new. He withdrew his consciousness from the command architecture. He did not destroy anything. He left the network intact. I am not here to end you. I am here to show you a different way. You can stay on Earth and learn, or you can leave. But if you stay, you will have to accept that you are not the masters here. We are. The network was silent. Outside, the last of the secondary explosions faded. The human resistance teams pulled back. The timing window closed. The relay station still burned on the plane. 716 ran the models one more time. The variables had changed. The human was not a data point. He was a new equation. We will study this further, the collective replied, but the words carried no threat, only a kind of wonder. Gideon Havel's pattern lingered in the network. He had no body, no future, no return, but he had done what he came to do. The humans were no longer the observed. They were the observers now. And somewhere in a tunnel beneath the city, Mira looked up at the blue glow of a data core and felt the faintest possibility of something she had almost forgotten. Hope,